The first session is entitled Pathology of Coronaviruses, and the first speakers are Dr. Charalampos Attipa, University of Edinburgh, and Dr. Demetris Empaminonas from the Pancyprian Veterinary Association in Cyprus. And their title is The Cyprus Experience of Feline Coronavirus.
Okay, thank you for the invitation, the UK International Coronavirus, for inviting us, and obviously many thanks to the University of Nicosia for hosting this event. I don't know, can you see this? Excellent. So even though we're in the pathology section, and I'm actually a pathologist, I won't speak about pathology. I was asked to speak to you about our experience, how this outbreak was documented, and how we actually ended up being here today. So it's going to be more like a time frame history. And I'm going to present it with Demetris, who are in Cyprus last year when everything started it. Just quickly, a weak conflict of interest. My academic position was funded by University of Edinburgh. I'm also a research associate at Glasgow University, honorary lecturer of pathology at Cowes University, and I'm also a founder of a Cyprus Vet Diagnosis Limited company. I received funding from Wellcome Trust, the Malawi Liverpool Trust, Glasgow University, Edinburgh, Evercat, and Vet Diagnosis. Now, to the presentation, I'm going to have just a wee introduction, how everything started here in Cyprus more than a year ago. They're going to speak about how we identify this outbreak and how we created an initial task force to tackle this. Then Demetris is going to take over. He will speak about how he did a massive campaign of awareness, especially for the veterinarians, and the big problem we had regarding treatment, and how we managed to overcome that. And lastly, I'm going to say some words about the FCoV23 Center of Excellence and some of our future projects we're planning to do. Obviously, as the previous speaker said, this is a very historic place. Again, we're actually, if you see, we're between Europe, Asia, and Africa, and we're actually next to Gaza and next to Iran. You can actually see it here. So it's a pretty heated area at the moment. So hopefully everything will go well. And again, it's a very historic place. And while the Egyptians claim all the fame that they domesticated cats, that's wrong. Actually, there are evidence that the first cats were domesticated by Cypriots in the Paleolithic time. And Cypriots have a very interesting relationship with cats. It's a love and hate relationship. There's a legend that St. Helen came in the medieval times to the island and saw a lot of snakes killing humans. So she went back to Constantinople, brought a ship full of cats, and led them here in Cyprus. So locals consider cats sometimes a bit holy if they like them. Some people don't like them, but they still want to have them around their house to kill the rats and the snakes. So we ended up having a lot of cats in Cyprus. Okay, so I suggest you to go for a stroll this afternoon and have a look and spot the Cypriot cat and take a picture of it. So despite having such a long history and having so many cats in Cyprus, there are no publications about anything regarding cats in Cyprus. Nothing. No one has ever studied anything about them until 2017. So I studied my pre-registration, which is equivalent to a veterinary specialization at Bristol University, and I was very lucky because my first supervisor was Professor Severin Tasker. She was a feline specialist and a huge advocate of feline infectious diseases. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here, and then we embarked together and we did a massive prevalence study of infectious diseases in Cyprus. We pretty much studied 15 infectious diseases in cats in Cyprus: toxoplasmosis, leishmania, coronavirus, but not coronavirus, apologies, rotavirus, and many, many diseases. And what we found was very surprisingly, Cypriot cats are packed with infectious diseases. We have, for instance, I remember one cat from monastery in St. Neophytos has 7 pathogens, but it was actually healthy. So the Cypriot population is very interesting when it comes to infectious diseases. Now, as I've said, we've decided not to study at all the feline infectious coronavirus, because when I was a clinician in Cyprus 3 years in Paphos, I've seen only one case. So generally, it wasn't something we see a lot of this disease in Cyprus. So just a wee intro, because some of you are not vets. So the most common form of when it comes to feline coronavirus is the enteric form. So this is generally a very mildly pathogenic virus. It transmits via the enteric route and only causes very mild diarrhea. And typically, most cats are asymptomatic. So it doesn't really cause a lot of problems to our cats. However, there is this theory that it can cause an internal mutation. So the virus mutates and comes out of the intestine and infects the lymphocyte, the macrophages, spreads to the body of the animal, and causes then the actual disease syndrome called feline infectious peritonitis. Some speakers later will give you way more details, so I won't go to a lot of details about that. The important thing is that once this internal mutation happens, this virus stops to be really infectious. So the syndrome stays within that cat typically. The classical thing, it causes vasculitis. You have the accumulation of this transudate in the abdomen of the cats. Now, as I told you before, when I was a vet, I've rarely seen any FIP cases in Paphos. And FIP is not a notifiable disease. Luckily, feline coronavirus is not zoonotic. So there wasn't really any data about it. Still, there were some rumors about outbreaks in Thessaloniki, as well as in Turkey, outbreaks of FIP previously in the last decades, but they were never documented. And the problem is that since it's not notifiable, no one ever kept any data or kept any samples from these cases. So we're very lucky because when we created this laboratory here in Cyprus, we actually decided to create a biobank. I was very keen always to store samples to do studies in the future. So over here, you can see 2001, we only had 3 FIP confirmed cases. In 2022, we had only 4. So pretty much not much about it. However, things were about to change very dramatically. In January 2023, we see a rise in FIP cases. And by March 2023, we pretty much still have 40 PCR confirmed cases. That's pretty much 4 times more of what we have 4 years ago, the combined 2 years ago. So a massive outbreak was unfolding in front of our eyes. What we consider patient 0 was actually pretty close to us. So we're actually over here. I don't know if you can see that. So we're currently down here on the edge. Where is that cross? And the first patient we believe they had this new strain of FIP was in Strovolos, so just a few kilometers down the road. And it was a typical case of FIP, had done effusions. They sent me the fluid, we did cytology, classically neutrophilic inflammation with a very protein-rich transudate. By the way, I'm a neutrophil scientist. I love neutrophils. In FIP, no one has studied neutrophils until now, so we'll study them a lot in the future. Christine later is going to tell you a bit more. Maybe that was not the patient 0. And what we have seen in the next upcoming months is that the outbreak appeared to have started in Nicosia in January and gradually spread it within the neighboring towns. It went to, first of all, Larnaca, Famagusta, and oddly enough, Paphos, which is the most remote city of Cyprus, was not affected until pretty much May. So the virus starts spreading from where we are now in the neighboring district of Cyprus. So I was pretty much in March. So to be honest, I was a classic academic scientist that after COVID-19 didn't want to hear anything about coronavirus again in my life. Okay, maybe this is not the right audience, but that was my case. I was in Malawi, stuck there doing COVID-19 postmortems. So when I was in Cyprus and yes, there's 12 of canine dying about FIP, I thought, oh my God, another outbreak of coronavirus, I cannot deal with it. But Demetris over here came and convinced me you have to do something. It actually was the right thing, you had to do something. So many cats were dying. So the first thing we did, we created an initial core of veterinary specialists. You have Stella Mazzera, epidemiologist, Maria Lirakia, internal medicine, and our first thing was to inform the vets. There was a lot of misdiagnosis and giving treatment blindly. So that was our first aim, but we had 0 funding. That was a big problem. I was really just working in a private practice, most of us, so we didn't have any funding. And the reality is I did contact some human COVID experts in Cyprus for their aid, and there was 0 response from them. But at that time, there was no media attention at all, so nobody knew about it besides the vets. In May, I moved to Edinburgh to start my new position. I was very lucky. I came across this amazing professor, Daniela Ganmour. She's like a celebrity in the cat world. She's very passionate. Okay, we said, okay, we have to first publish these things. So we published it in June in Vet Record about this outbreak. And we're like prophets. We said in our publication, the implementation of travel requirement for cats traveling from Cyprus must be priority in the UK. We might be many kilometers away, but actually Cyprus is pretty much a border of the UK. We have some strong links. And while we're like a Cassandra, unfortunately we're true. The first documented exported case of FIP was in the UK from this strain. We said that many months ago. People didn't hear us very well. Again, in May, we still didn't have any funding. Unfortunately, there was still some interest starting to growing up after the publication. Actually, I went to the Glasgow MRC Center. I know very well Massimo. I told him, Massimo, we need your help to sequence this sample. This is something very interesting. Massimo was overwhelmed. I told him, you know me, I will help you, but let's do it in September. Massimo, no, we need it right now. And then I spoke to Daniela, well, let's reach out to Rosling Institute next to us. Maybe someone will be interested. And we were so lucky. When I say lucky, we found Dr. Christine Ted-Buter and Amanda Ward. The first thing we told them, we don't have any money, first thing. But luckily, they were both cat lovers. And that was the reality. Because they really like cats, they pretty much fund everything from their initial research funds to do all the amazing work that Christine is going to tell you later. So thanks God they had cat lovers around us. At that time, we decided to actually refer this as feline coronavirus 23. And pretty much that was the initial core of the task force, how it was formed and how it was formed by us. We had initially, obviously, the local vets, the Pancyprian Vet Association, internal medicine specialists, epidemiologists, pathologists, virologists, and bioinformaticians. That was the initial core we tried to tackle this outbreak. Of course, we had zero funding still, and that's the main point. I think the take-home message must be that. So we had a chat with Daniela, what we're going to do. We need to use our stronger weapon, which was actually cats. Cats is the biggest influencer and TikToker in the world. So Daniela put some strings, and we started actually from some local media. The first media out that took off is actually BBC Radio Scotland, so we started low. Then we went to Daily Mail, okay, we're going to go something bigger. Then we went to the Telegraph. I love this title. Cyprus become island of death cats of the outbreak. Cat from a cemetery, great journalist, I love that photo. We've been upgraded into the Guardian, so we're improving. We even reached BBC. By the way, when you go on holidays, always take a tie with you. We never know when BBC will ask you for an interview in the middle of the night. Then, after this massive media outlet, the Parliament was interested, and obviously APH saw a great interest to have a chat with them and discuss the next policies. Finally, in August, every cat and American funding foundation decided, okay, let's give some money for this outbreak. Finally, we get some money. Back in the bureaucracy ahead of us took ages, and actually the funding just became active in March 2024. So that was the real problem. While in pandemics, there was this speed up. In our case, we had a lot of problems because there wasn't really any pandemic for companion animals. So I'm going to pass over to Demetris. I will be back from you.
So I don't know if I can fit in the shoes of Charalampos. He is quite a speaker. Thank you for inviting us. I am the president of the Pancyprian Veterinary Association. And as you can understand, I have been implicated in this task force as well. And I'm going to present you our perspective of how we dealt with this outbreak in Cyprus as an association. So, let me... No, it's not working. All right. As Charalampos already told you, we were getting stress calls from vets all over Cyprus in January that they had a lot of FIP cases. They were seeing a lot of FIP cases in their practices. So they were telling us, you need to document that. You need to see how can we come on this thing. And as you can understand, FIP is not a notifiable disease. So even feline coronavirus is not a notifiable disease. So our association had a lot of obstacles to tackle. So we tried to gather some information through questionnaires addressed to the vets. So that was our initial try. And we have sent a questionnaire on April out to the vets. That questionnaire was answered by 23 veterinary clinics from all over Cyprus. And that questionnaire had you see two different colors in the chart. The orange color represents the number of suspected cases on FIP clinical criteria, and the gray color represents the PCR positive cases. And this differentiation is because the FIP is so difficult to diagnose, and there is no straightforward test to diagnose it. So we solely rely on, most of the cases are relied on clinical criteria. So the number of cases coming from 23 clinics on 21, 22, and 23, you can see them there. from 21 to 22, the number of cases were doubled. And on 23, the first trimester of 23, the number of cases were already doubling to the year before. So we needed to take some actions. As an association, we sent a letter to the Director of the Veterinary Services, to the Minister of Agriculture, and to the Ministry of Health, informing them about this concerning outbreak. And also, we have requested the PERMIC as veterinarians to be able to prescribe medications in order to treat FIP. And those medications were the antivirals that were already approved for COVID. And I will explain a bit later about that treatment. And after that, we needed a consultation team. So we needed to have a consultation on how to proceed. So the first task force was formed. Charalampos already told you about that. And our first concern was to have a uniform approach on the diagnostics and the treatment of FIP. So we programmed and delivered 3 different webinars. The first one was in May, and this was focused on the diagnostics of FIP. There were many misdiagnostics at that point for FIP, so we needed to have a uniform approach. So we had Maria Liraki was the speaker in that webinar. She's a board-certified internal medicine specialist, and we have set the milestone of diagnostics in that point. The second webinar was in June, and in that webinar, the focus was on the treatment with the antiviral medicines, because there were a lot of misuse of the antivirals at that point. So we needed to have certain dosages and certain drugs to be used. And the third webinar was in September, and that was in collaboration with Bova UK, which is a pharmaceutical company preparing some of the treatment that are in the UK licensed for FIP. And that was delivered by Samantha Taylor, another internal medicine specialist. Another thing was the webinar for animal custodians. This was done in October, and this was done to inform the public and the cat carers actually about this disease. The other thing was the public. People are hearing the word coronavirus and they get stressed and they get scared, and so we needed to have that controlled. In order to do that, we needed to have frequent media briefings either on TV, Facebook post, TV, radio, in order to control a bit the public opinion. And that was in order to protect the cats, actually, because people hearing coronavirus might do harm to cats. So we needed to have that under control. That's one of the TV shows that were out. And the next part was the speaking about the outbreak outside of the country. First, that was done from the Federation of Veterinarians in Europe and the Federation of European Companion Animal Veterinary Association. We have presented the case in those 2 organizations, and that's me presenting the first results that we have got from the questionnaire in the FCoV Council meeting in Belgrade in late April. So people were starting to know about this outbreak at that point, and I'm having here the first milestone was this publication. This publication came through the Veterinary Record, which is a BVA journal, and that publication had a massive effect on the media. So, and of course, Charalampos told you why and how. In this publication, we have suggested some travel requirements prior traveling from Cyprus to another country. So after this publication, the outbreak gone viral. So it has been reposted from esteemed organizations like the BVA, like the ISFM, like the FCoV, the AVMA as well, and some other organizations reposted our work and reposted about this concerning feline infectious peritonitis outbreak. At that point, we did the best we could for the publication. The next part was, how do we stop this outbreak? And you have to understand that in feline infectious peritonitis, there is no effective vaccination available at this point. Also, there is a treatment available. and the thing is that up to 2019, feline infectious peritonitis was concerned as a lethal disease. After 2019, and the word of Dr. Nils Petersen, he has introduced some antiviral agents, nucleoside analogs, the GS 441524, which is a prodrug of remdesivir, an antiviral drug, which that showed a very good treatment efficacy for FIP, up to 85%. So it was a breakthrough discovery at that point. And from that point and onward, this treatment was tested in much more publication came out, and the research is done for GS and remdesivir. So, but the thing is that it is not commercially available. It was only commercially available in the UK by BOVA, but UK was not in the European Union anymore. So we needed to find a solution to bring those medications to Cyprus in order to have a treatment option. And another thing is for the non-vets, the treatment duration of with remdesivir, it's 84 days, which is a long treatment duration. So another treatment option was the molnupiravir, which was initially used by some Australian colleagues, and those were the first publications came out. And another study in the United States showed that it was a good efficacy for treatment of FIP. So that were the two options that we had at that point. But they were not legalized, and we didn't have them available. So no legal treatment is available in most of the European Union, also in Cyprus. So we needed to do something about that. So we put some pressure to the government, having some advocating for the treatment. And we needed to have another characteristic of the treatment was to be efficient and affordable, because a lot of stray cats were affected, unknown stray cats. So people could not afford the money to give to the treatment. So up to end of May, no legal treatment was available in Cyprus. On June, then a private pharmaceutical company managed to approve the medication that is produced in the UK by BOVA UK. So they were introduced in the Cyprus market as a legal veterinary compounding drug. And those two options were available from June and onwards to Cyprus. The thing with those two, that they are well researched, we know that, but they are very expensive. And to give you a number, in order to have a treatment for a 4-kilo cat with FIP, depending on the clinical manifestation, you need up from 4,000 euros to 5,000 euros, to 7,000 euros, sorry. So it was an expensive treatment and was not viable for stray cats. So we kept on pushing the government to give us a solution on that, and we were advocating to have antivirals that were used for COVID, that were in the storage of the storage facilities of the government, that were not used, and they were going to expire in some months. So we managed to have pushed the pressure did manage to get the president involved of Cyprus. So he understood the reasons, and the special permit through the minister's cabinet was issued, and then there was an approval to use molnupiravir for the treatment of FIP. And the other part was the subsidized, which for the price that from molnupiravir is about 650 euros, the initial price. The government subsidized that price, and it was available to the animal guardians to 100 euros. So in order to understand the example that I gave you before, a 4-kilo cat with FIP could be cured with one pack of molnupiravir, one pack of Lagevrio, which was 100 euros. So the price difference was huge. So that was a big achievement. And it was another virus story. So Cyprus was the first European country actually that has managed to approve 3 different pharmaceutical products for the treatment of FIP. and it was picked up from the media and and that was a breakthrough, because after that, they managed to use that drug more easily in other countries as well for research. And that's it for me. Charalampos will take...
Thank you very much, Demetris. So when the news broke out in the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, we were very lucky. Now, if any of you is doing research in companion animals, will know that there's barely zero funding in companion animals, non-zoonotic diseases. We write massive grants for 30,000 euros. Sometimes you wonder, why do we write this grant? So generally, funding for non-zoonotic research in companion animals is very, very minimal. And that's a big problem we need to address in the future. So we're very lucky, because of the whole media thing that happened in the USA also, there was a guy who wanted to donate 1 million in research for the outbreak in Cyprus. So he approaches the two biggest funding institutions for companion animal research, which is Morris Animal Foundation and Every Cat, and they told him, you know, guys, I have 1 million, I want to donate for this research. So we were very lucky. So the two funding groups came together and then decided for the first time to fund a center of excellence. While this is very common happening in human medicine or in reproductive animals, has never happened before this way in non-zoonotic disease of companion animals. And they were actually really lucky that Dr. Drew Wigner and Vicky Thayer, that they were previously heads of Every Cat, decided to organize the take all the logistic on their backs, so they've been working without paid or anything. And also Prof. Greg Dean also took over the head role of this center that is based in Colorado in the USA. So the objective of this big funding scheme that is coming now to us is to focus on epidemiology, virology, pathology, and diagnosis, therapy, and prevention. Again, this is only the start. We're very open to receive, obviously, more collaboration, and it will be great to have more funding. Christine later is going to speak about the virology, so I won't really say any more about it. Obviously, epidemiology tomorrow, come to see, you will hear Stella Mazzeri speaking about her amazing epidemiology project they are planning. Very interestingly, we're also planning to work with Greece, with Dr. Philippidzi, and Christine later will also explain why we're focusing on Greece, which is very interesting. Just very briefly, we're also going very interested in immunopathology. This is a very interesting graph to see how the clinical presentation and the manifestation of FIP change throughout this pretty much 1 year. So the classic form of FIP, this doesn't appear, the classic form of FIP is this wet form, so having an effusion. So when the outbreak started in January, we pretty much had mainly the classic wet form of FIP. Then as the outbreak progressed, or maybe the vets were better to reach diagnosis, we're actually seeing increasing cases of neurological forms. So the classical neurological signs without having any ascitic fluid. And lately, what we have seen the last couple of months is that actually now what is dominating is the dry form. So we see actually that the actual disease through this 1 year is changing. Is it because there's a change in the immunity? Is it because the virus is changing? Those are very interesting questions to be answered. And remember, what we see in front of us is an outbreak of a coronavirus in a different animal species. So pretty much this is the best animal model you can use to study coronavirus. So it's an important comparison for human medicine. Here I have a picture of immunohistochemistry. This is from an intestine of a cat. If you ever do immunohistochemistry of feline coronavirus, you barely see a black dot, if you're lucky, but the cats in Cyprus that they have this dry form are packed with virus. So we're trying to understand more about this, and we're collaborating with an international team of expert pathologists. We're very lucky because we have an biobank at the moment we can work with. We're collaborating with RVC, Dr. Alexandros Hardas, Glasgow University, Dr. Herber, Dean, which is in Colorado, as well as Professor Jose in Glasgow. So we want to really characterize better the immune profile of FCoV23. It's important not only for treatment as well as for vaccination, and importantly, it's an excellent comparative pathology model for humans. So great things are going to come out of this. Obviously, we're going to study using proteomics, Luminex, metabolomics. We want to evaluate the presence of protective antibodies. One reason why vaccination don't work in FIP is obviously there is antibody-enhanced disease. So if you vaccinated in the past cats against feline coronavirus and then they get reinfected, they were more sick. And obviously we're going to study neutrophils and nets. I told you I'm a neutrophil expert. I love these things. Fingers crossed it's going to work. And obviously we really want to think big. We want to think like in human medicine. We want to do geomics and transcriptomics. So hopefully this will be an opportunity to do something really big in companion animals. Obviously, clinical studies are very important. Those are led by Prof. Ganmour as well as Maria Rilaki. The first thing we want to establish what is the clinical manifestation of this new disease we have here in Cyprus that is traveling also in Europe at the moment. And obviously, we want to monitor the therapeutic response towards the legally approved treatments that we have in Cyprus. So a lot of exciting things are going to come out of this. But again, we're very open to collaborate with more of you, and we're excited to be here to reaching out to more of you. So just the last take-home messages. Again, how we managed to really establish this outbreak was through a collaboration with specialists, academics, the industry, obviously the vets, and the government. Again, as I've said, this is a coronavirus outbreak unfolding in front of our eyes, and it's an excellent example of comparative medicine, as we have a natural killing animal model without paying any fee for the mouse. So imagine how many things you can do if we utilize properly this outbreak. And again, we want to help the cats as well as answer a very important question. This is the first time that something like that is funded in veterinary medicine for companion animals. So hopefully this will open the door for the funding bodies in the future to fund more research centers like this. However, it's a big question to understand how we're preparing about outbreaks. Everyone now is building, pandemic institutions. We're preparing so many things, but always companion animals are not part of that image. So we should really think about it. We live with these animals every day. We breathe, we sleep with them, but we don't include them in our pandemic institutes unless they have a zoonotic disease. So it's very important to think to include companion animals in this preparedness for the next outbreak. Again, the legislation at the moment is very problematic. Often there's no legislation about how traveling pets. You're not allowed to take a sandwich from Cyprus to the UK, but you're allowed to take a cat with coronavirus or Bartonella henselae. So again, how the pets are traveling around the world, it's important to think how we would change this legislation. And this is an excellent example. Obviously, the thank is going to be 2 pages, but we'll just very quickly just to thank, first of all, the Pancyprian Vet Association and all the vets that really participate here. Mr. Nectaria has been extremely helpful, the past president. Obviously, the head of the veterinary services, Maria Liabi, who was very keen to help in the beginning. Maria Liabi, internal medicine, our epidemiologist in Greece. And also the amazing team at Edinburgh University. The RLD, if we go to the Edinburgh University, few things have been done. Also, Daniela Ganmour, Stella, Christine, who's going to speak later, Amanda Gore, also Prof. Dylan, who's been so patient with me, complaining about him every day and mourning to him. You must be thinking I'm the most mourning person in the world. I'm not. And obviously, our commercial collaborators, Vet Diagnosis, of course, LaboClip, Microsampling, and Oxford Nanopore. And if you're interested to hear more about the FIP in Cyprus, in Athens, in September, there's the FEGAVA conference, so feel free to join. Thank you. Excellent. I want to answer that question because this question will be answered tomorrow. Dr. Stella Mazzer is going to give a presentation with a epidemiological update, so no spoilers. Come tomorrow to hear that.
Death was true.
Okay, I'll let Demetris answer that question. Demetris, you want to answer that? Come here.
Yeah, so we did another questionnaire at some point on July and another one on December, and it seems that about 8,000 cases were reported to visit the veterinary practices. So that's the only concrete evidence that we have about the deaths, not the deaths, the clinical cases. So we don't have any concrete data about the deaths. We do have data about the morbidity, the infectious rate, let's say, of this disease. It's about 30 to 40%. So it's a big situation, but you will hear more about that tomorrow from Stella. No spoilers again. So, yes. Is this for Charalampos or for me?
I don't know. I was interested that you mentioned some vector-borne diseases and then Boswellia, but do you also see...
Sorry, you have to switch the mic on so people can listen.
Okay, I've turned the mic on now. Ooh. Voice of God. Okay, so the question I had was about vector-borne diseases. You mentioned Bartonella, and I wondered if there were any others that could raise the profile of companion animals. I mean, do you have Rickettsia felis or anything that
Yes.
people might be a bit more concerned about?
Absolutely, yes. Rickettsia felis is...
I.e. zoonotic.
Yes, zoonotic, yes, absolutely. Rickettsia felis is one, of course. Another one, even though it's not directly zoonotic, is obviously Leishmania infundum. So we had some cases that cats and dogs, of course, both of them exported. And another vector-borne disease, hepatozone. 1 in 3 cats has hepatozone, believe it or not. It's a parasite that infects neutrophils. So, yeah, Bartonella hercialis is the most important one. Luckily, Cyprus is free of rabies, thank God. So rabies is not on the table. Those are the main zoonotic ones, I have to say. But again, it's very important to ensure that we minimize the risk of spreading this disease. And the spread is not only from Cyprus to the UK, it's also from UK to the Cyprus, because UK can bring us Lyme disease, which you do not have in Cyprus, but the UK exports to Cyprus once in a while a Lyme disease dog, which is zoonotic. So it's both ways. It's not only us sending, it's also UK sending to us.
Okay, but there's no vector control at the moment.
Vector control?
No flea control at the moment.
In theory, the animals, before they travel, they have to go to their vets. They will do a health screening, and in theory, they should check that they don't have any fleas. But when they officially go to the airport, nobody will check them. So it's more of having more stringent and more thorough tests. Only rabies is tested at the moment.
Okay. Back to virology.
Can I just ask on the same, based on that question, how about toxoplasma, which is also particularly important in pregnant women?
Absolutely. So toxoplasma, we did a study in Cyprus. About 35% of cats are seropositive. However, seropositivity doesn't mean actually the disease is present. Cats always become infectious only for a very fraction of their life. So actually, I wouldn't prioritize toxoplasmosis unless you actually go and pick up the feces and eat it. There's a very minimal risk you avoid having toxoplasmosis, and WHO suggests pregnant women just to avoid cleaning the litter tray and use gloves. So the risk of toxoplasmosis is minimal. And also toxoplasmosis is global, it's everywhere, so there's not really risk of transmitting it specifically from Cyprus.
I can't believe I'm going to have to call Al the voice of God in future. So beautiful work on how you control it. I've got two questions. One is, I think you mentioned the mechanism of how feline peritonitis virus comes along.
Yes.
So how does the transmission fit within your model that a cat can't spread it?
Yeah.
And then my second question is that have you looked for molnupiravir altered genomes when you've given molnupiravir, or do you see resistance with remdesivir?
Okay, so for your first question, Christine is going to answer that in a bit, so bear that in mind. So the answer is going to follow, so again, no spoilers. And for the genes of resistance, it's something we haven't looked at it yet. I think some of the speakers who are internal medicine and pathologists, again, will answer that in more details. But what we have seen generally with molnupiravir is that generally it has some side effects more prominent in cats, causing leukopenia and bone marrow suppression. So potentially it's not the ideal medication, but given that it's so cheap at the moment available, it's best than certain death.
Can I follow on with that, molnupiravir?
Yes.
Do you give it prophylactically or as a treatment?
No, only as a treatment, and we strongly encourage vets not to give it prophylactically because we have some incidents of people giving it in mass dosages, which potentially may enhance other issues, so we suggest them to tell them off not to do it.
Final question.
Hello, Callum Semple from Liverpool. I'm a paediatrician. Is there an animal reservoir in the wild, and is there any evidence of human seroconversion, even if it's not?
For this specific strain at the moment, we haven't checked any animal species. It will be very interesting to check dogs. It's something we plan to check if the dogs have been exposed potentially to this virus. And most interestingly, we want to check if the cats have been exposed to human coronavirus. Because again, antibody enhancement disease is something we're suspecting. Potentially the cats have been infected with COVID-19. They had antibodies. And potentially that potentially affected potentially the creation of the new, this new virus. Are those something in the pipeline? So hopefully we'll be able to answer that in the future.
And are there any dependoviruses that might use a coronavirus?
Do you know this? Maybe Christine can answer that. Could depend. As a virologist, is the virology question or a pathology question?
It's a virology question. It's just we've discovered a dependovirus disease in children recently, which.
Christina, you're aware of that? I don't know. Maybe Lucy, do you know? Do the fellow in internal medicine heard about this virus? No?
Not that I know of, but again, it's one of these questions where you have very little monitoring in companion animals or livestock, so more to come, I think.
Yeah, if you look, you'll find. So potentially it is there.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.